Rick, we get a fair amount of comments about the shirts we wear and the jackets we've had that we've worn here in the Volcanoes Lair.
In
What
our swag, like our Go coffee cups.
what is the shirt you're wearing today?
So this actually, we just today opened our new Global Security Operations Center, which is pretty cool. Let me show you this. I was actually just over there before hand and just got a tour of our new 24-hour Global Security Operations Center. Pretty cool, huh?
And for those who are not watching on YouTube, but you may be listening to the podcast, there's a 3 AI generated image of sort of the Global Operations Center of the future that we're building where? At our headquarters?
That one I just showed you, that's not AI.
That's not AI?
That was a real video. Yeah, that was the real deal. So I was in our new Global Security Operations Center.
So now you can't tell the difference between AI and real life.
It's true. It's true. It's getting realistic, man.
All right. Why don't we get started?
All right. Let's kick this party off. Here we go.
Risk. The final frontier. These are the stories of the Axon enterprise. Our mission to protect life, to seek amazing people, and live epic tales. Come, let us boldly go.
Welcome to episode 7 of the Boldly Go podcast.
That was a little loud this time.
That was
I hope they'll tune that down.
very loud. Rick, when we left off in episode 6, you were telling us a story about a training in Seattle. And this was, I guess, right before or led into the IPO. I think maybe we should start episode 7 reminding everybody about that story and what happened.
Yep. Yeah. So we had just, when we had Hans here, launched the M26. So we had this, for the first time ever, a truly effective taser. And we launched that in early 2000. And over the first 6 months of the year, we ended up going out and demonstrating this across the country, Hans in the Winnebago. And then we had this investment banker that came to a training in Seattle. And they were so impressed by the reaction of the crowd that they said, hey, we're going to take you public, which was pretty crazy because like that's normally something that happens at the end of the road after you've raised money from lots of other venture capitalists, but nobody would invest in us.
And as a reminder, up to this point, it was just your dad and one other guy.
Yeah, my dad and Bruce Culver. My dad has passed away. Bruce is still out there. Thank you again, Bruce. He saved our bacon on multiple occasions. And so that began a process to go public in October of 2000. Now, one of the things I think that actually helped a lot was, you all remember the internet bubble?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, in late 99, like the internet, that's why nobody wanted to talk to us. People were like, you're not internet. You guys do this weird electric gun thing. But then suddenly in I think it was early 2000, the internet bubble popped. And if you think about it, all these investment banks and other businesses, like people have to have projects. They need deals. They need programs to work on. And so suddenly these banks were interested in us. They're like, wait a minute, you're not the internet? Because the internet's so like last decade, right? The internet's dead. You guys make a physical product and you have like real dollar revenue and you're growing.
So you went from not being hot to the hot girl.
We did. That's partly because like the hot industry had tanked.
Right.
But
because your friends were working in, as you mentioned before in prior episodes, Silicon Valley, working for all these internet companies, doing really, which many people thought were cool things. And you're down in Arizona working on a electric weapon company.
Yep. That's absolutely. And then suddenly the world shifted where the internet was now seen as overblown and overhyped, and people wanted to see real companies. Yeah, so that began the process for us of going public, which I didn't really know what that entailed, right? Most people don't. So the banker started explaining to us, they said, well, you have to go through this due diligence, you have to hire lawyers and accountants, and it looked like that was going to cost us around $1 million. And we didn't have $1 million, right? So we're like, okay, if we had money, we wouldn't be here trying to raise money. And so Bruce Culver came out of pocket to fund some of that. But one of the things that we did that was, in retrospect, pretty innovative is I called a friend of mine named Matt McBrady. He was a PhD student. He was teaching at Harvard Business School. And we said, hey, first of all, we need to grow our board with verified experts. And the guy teaching finance at Harvard's a good one. But then I said, hey, and we got to figure out how to do this due diligence thing on the cheap. And so Matt came out to Arizona, and we just started talking to the bankers about, okay, what is it exactly that needs to happen? And what we learned is this due diligence, you basically pay a bunch of lawyers to go through all of your corporate records and then find where things are inconsistent, and then they rewrite them, and they have to sort of clean up all your corporate records. So we said, well, we can't afford to pay lawyers to do that. And so Matt and I started going through all of our corporate records ourselves. And what was pretty innovative at the time, we would scan the documents, and then we would hyperlink them. So we would create links between, like, if this board, the board of directors notes said there was some agreement the board approved, we would create a clickable link, just like on the internet. And that would then take you to that other document. And in the process of doing this, you end up with this web of interconnected documents, and you end up cross-referencing things, and you find inconsistent things. And when we did, we had gotten approval from all of our board members and other folks to say, hey, look, we're going to reprint these documents and then just have you guys all sign them. So going through that, when we finally got ready to bring the lawyers in, we had already done the first scan of the due diligence, and we gave them everything on a disk. Like, here's all of our corporate records, everything's cross-linked, and it probably saved us $500,000 on the due diligence by just doing it yourself.
And I mean, that's 2001, right? I mean, that's still pretty innovative for the internet. Was fairly new, and doing clickable links and that, putting those all together. You started out being innovative in terms of.
Well, you kind of have to. I think that's the thing you learn with a lot of founders is when you work in a big company, right? There's always somebody to do that. When you're a little company, there's nobody to do that, and so you have to figure out how to do it. And a lot of times that means you end up like I think the bankers, lawyers were really impressed. They're like, wow, nobody's ever done this. And we're like, well, we kind of didn't have a choice. We knew we were going to be paying by the hour for you to review stuff. So we didn't want there to be a bunch of easy mistakes that we'd have to pay you to fix. We'd do it ourselves.
So what's the mood inside the company at the time? I mean, again, started in 93, consumer business. You couldn't sell to law enforcement. Then you could finally sell to law enforcement in 98. And then that's when you start having success. So you're having success from 98 up to 2001. But still, it's a struggle, right? I mean,
oh yeah, and I would say the mood in the company was nervous. So we had gotten to the point where we were right around break even, cash flow break even. And so basically before that, we were having to go back to my dad and Bruce, every month. Hey, we're going to be at 50 grand short, 100 grand short, and we're getting to where we were breaking even. So we're like, okay, now we still had a bunch of past due bills, and we still owed Silicon Valley Bank, I think, $1.5 million. But at least the business was starting to sustain itself. And so we had a real debate, like, hey, should we just do this ourselves for another year and not have to worry about going out to raise money? Let's just earn our way out of this, because we're going to have to come out of pocket money we don't have. So that was risky. But we ultimately decided, you never know when an investment bank is going to, maybe they would go away, right? You got to strike while the iron's hot. So we asked Bruce and Phil to come up with some of the money to fund the due diligence to get us to this stage of the IPO.
So you're doing the due diligence, and then what happens?
You're
putting the documents together for the lawyers to do the due diligence.
Then so the next stage is a couple of things happen. First, right as we get to the end of all this, our auditors, the accountants, basically said, oh, hey, we have a problem. You guys, we're going to have to give you what's called a going concern opinion. What that means is we have a concern as auditors that you guys don't have enough money to be in business in a year. And we're like, okay, nothing controversial about that. That's why we're raising money, because we don't have enough money. And they said, no, but the problem is you can't go public with a going concern because it'll spook investors. And well, we were going out to raise $10 million in the IPO.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, this is stupid. Like once we raise the $10 million,
You'll have enough money.
Yeah, we have plenty of money. We're not going to have a going concern. So now they said, well, that's logic. Logic doesn't always apply to accounting. You can't go public as a going concern. You've got to come up with another $500,000. Now, I think part of it between us was I think the accountants want to make sure they get paid if the IPO fails. But let's just keep that between us. Don't tell our accountants.
And so you had to raise even more money from Bruce to get you
so
do the
luckily,
diligence.
My dad was tapped. He had nothing left.
Yeah.
And so we went to Bruce. And Bruce was also struggling at the time. We weren't out our welcome there. And apparently his wife had some money left. They had divided it in their different accounts. So he had to go ask his wife to borrow $500,000 to fund, to put money in so that we would qualify to get past this concern and go the IPO.
I mean, for your father and for Bruce, is it at this point they have such faith in the business and they see taking off, or now they're all in now?
No, this is like you're at the table, you're broke, you owe the bank, you owe the house. Like it's you don't have a choice.
Gotcha.
It's like if we fail, we're toast. So that was Bruce going all in at that point.
Right.
So then you start the roadshow, and this was actually one of the coolest things ever. So up until then, we would always share hotel rooms on trips. Right?
Mm-hmm.
We're scraping by everywhere we can.
You still share hotel rooms.
I still enjoy it. Other people tell me it's weird or like kind of risky from an HR perspective.
Well, we've shared hotel rooms.
Yeah.
It's not that weird, but anyway.
Well, I think it makes it more like a road trip. Like it's like the old college days. Like I enjoy, I don't know, you share a hotel room with somebody, get to know them. But regardless, that was like, we didn't have a choice back then.
Back then it was a necessity.
And so we're lining up the IPO. And one thing that's interesting about IPOs is this: you go out to raise money and there's cost for the roadshow, right? You've got to, in some cases, they'll rent private jets to fly you to different locations so you can hit multiple meetings in a day. And the thing about these deals is you got to move fast. Apparently, you don't want to leave a deal out for long, because if it doesn't get funded, people get nervous and they start to talk about like what's wrong with the deal, and you might lose. The whole thing might come apart. And so it's important you move fast. But the other thing I learned was that normally when you're running a business, you pay attention to the expenses, right? You've got your revenue, and then you take the expenses, and what's left is profit. When you're doing a roadshow, you have sort of the gross amount of money. You go out, you raise 10, 11, 12 million dollars. Let's say if you spend $1 million on the roadshow, that just comes off the top. And then what's left is the money you raise.
What you have. Yep.
And so it creates this slightly weird dynamic where people just don't give a shit about money. They're like, private jets, fancy dinner, stay in a nice hotel room. And so we went from like scraping the barrel. Like I had a Super 8 VIP card from Super 8 Motel. I'd stay there so much. I had the Southwest Airlines VIP card. My wife flew free with me everywhere I went. Anyway, actually, a quick side story on that. As we were struggling before the IPO, there was a moment when I had to lay off 2/3 of the company in 1998, 99, in that frame. And so we laid it, we fired a bunch of people. And so we had everybody gather up their unused airline tickets. And, this is where you got to save every penny. And so we put together a letter. And so we had all the tickets for American Airlines, all for Southwest, et cetera. And we sent that with a letter to the company saying, hey, look, we just went through a downsizing. We may not survive. Will you at least give us flight vouchers, because these people don't work here anymore,
right?
Or give us some money, give us a refund. And every airline out there said, nope, sorry, our policy is these are non-refundable, except Southwest Airlines. I got a letter from them, and they said, they gave us a full refund, and they said, everybody at Southwest is pulling for you.
And that's why you're such you fly Southwest. Well, when I met you, like, you were a loyal Southwest. You didn't fly anything else. Like, that was your airline.
Yep. I gave them a one-stop benefit. I would do a hop over a nonstop, one hop on Southwest, because I was so impressed that they were the only one that exuded they kind of cared about us.
They cared about the customer.
Yeah, they did. They were obsessed with the customer. What a great value.
And so you're on the road. You do the road show.
Oh yeah. So the road show, we're flying, and private jets
I mean,
between meetings.
have you been in private jets before this time?
No.
Right. This is
No.
this. I mean, this is a startup.
big deal.
You've been scrappy. You've had to lay people off. You're going from consumer to law enforcement. Maybe you have a hit. It's starting to take off. You're breaking even, and now
we're flying around in private jets
Now
with
you're
these
flying
bankers. Expensive dinners. It was fun. It was just decadent fun. And to be honest, the bankers had also said, "Hey, do you guys want to do a European part to the roadshow?" And we figured, well, we have international customers. We should get international investors, and it would be kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I think for me, one of the highlights was in the European leg. They had us pick a couple cities, together with the bankers where they had customers, and one of them was Monaco. The famous James Bond casino in Monaco.
F1 racing.
Yeah, and so I remember we flew into Monaco. I think we flew commercial in Monaco, and then we got in a helicopter and we choppered in to Monaco proper from the Nice airport.
Wow.
That was a badass moment. That was like, wow, we have made it.
Yep.
Like we're in a helicopter going to Monaco and a road show for an IPO.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was.
And how long does this road? How long does a road show or this road show last when you're trying to?
They try to get them done as fast as possible. I think ours was about 2 weeks.
That's pretty fast.
It was. And look, our road show was wild compared to even other road shows, because remember that what had made the company at this point was doing demos of the taser. So when we would do training events, cops would volunteer and they'd get hit with a taser. So as we were going around, we would ask for volunteers from bankers. And people still talk about it to this day. I'll see people like, I remember you guys came to our office in 2001. And we would, we'd take volunteers.
So you take the M26 around at the time. Is that what it was?
Yep. We had the M26. We took it around with us, and we tased a lot of bankers. And it's the same. It was the same dynamic. One person would get hit, then they'd get up laughing and like, whoa, and then they'd challenge their friends, and they get that same kind of energy. People were just amazed that this thing could like shut you down like a light switch, and then you'd get up and you're fine.
Yeah. I mean, we certainly don't mandate anybody inside the company, as we call it, a voluntary exposure. They get tased.
Or riding the buffalo, as we used to say, when we had more character and less lawyers.
Or riding the buffalo. But I've been tased, certainly. I don't know how you can talk about a taser and understand a taser until you experience a taser and what that truly is in terms of the neuromuscular incapacitation. And then when it's over, it's over. Like that is like, so for those bankers, like they're like, oh, now I understand the company. Like,
yeah, little teaser, little foreshadowing. John Oliver, the comedian, just did a pretty negative piece on us, and one of the things he challenged us on is like they say it's cultish, or that they criticize us that our employees will get hit with the product that we make. Well, our customers do it. People would criticize us that the product's not safe, and so like, hey, what better way can we put our money where our mouth is and take a hit? So it's one of those where it's still, it's one of these. The critics are going to critique, and we took hits and we hit bankers, and you know what? It educated people in 5 seconds. They know what our product does.
Yep. And well, on your tease there, are you saying we might be discussing? Now, I haven't seen the episode. Are you saying we might do a little rebuttal at some point?
We are. Look, I'm a John Oliver fan. I think he's funny. I think he was presented things in a very lopsided way. And, it's going to, that episode, we're going to be filming it here in a couple days. It's going to take us a few hours because it's pretty easy to throw mud at the wall.
Sure.
Like washing it off and actually giving you the background story is going to take some time. But anyway, the IPO, it was the Wild West of IPOs and tiny. Like we raised a little over $10 million. I think it was 10 or 13 million.
And that was the expectation though?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you know what you're going to raise when you go out. Like today, people don't do IPOs at that level.
Right.
Even back then, it was considered tiny. But we got out. We on May 8th. Well, actually, before I get to us actually getting out, there's a story. So we go through the roadshow, and then the last thing you do is called the pricing meeting, and that's where. So when you're out on the roadshow, you basically have a range. So you're talking to people who say, hey, this deal is going to price at, and I think ours was between $10 and $13, and it was kind of a weird deal because it wasn't just a share of stock. You got 1.5 shares of stock and 1.5 warrants that gave you the right to buy more stock. So it doesn't really translate to today. But the point is, for this unit that you were going to buy, it would be a range of pricing. And then at the end of the roadshow, you go and you sit with the bankers, and you sit together to determine what the final price is going to be. They call this the pricing meeting. And of course, we want the price to be the high end, like $13 or whatever it was, and they want it to be low. And so there's this natural dynamic. And going into this, I know I'm a terrible negotiator. I've got no poker face. And I remember, and my dad's like trying to pump me up because he's like, Rick, you got to be the lead negotiator.
Right.
Here's some advice.
CEO.
And we walk into the room with Chet Paulson. So it was Paulson Investments. Chet Paulson was the owner, effectively, the founder. And we came into the pricing meeting, and he was white as a ghost. And I remember looking at my dad, and my dad looks at me, and we're like, uh-oh, like something's wrong. And then, of course, you're wondering, oh, are they going to try some crazy negotiating tactic? Like, what's going on? But it just, all of a sudden, everything felt wrong. And what happened, so this was, again, the early days of the internet. When you go and you do the roadshow, people sign up for how many shares they want. The banks, like, so
Right.
JP Morgan wants some shares, Bank of America. Well, like a third of our deal was subscribed by a company, I believe it was called IPO Desktop. But basically it was an internet-based firm that was selling direct to consumers or, to investors. And so Chet Paulson says, guys, sit down. I've got some bad news. And he says, I got a call from the SEC this morning. They audited this IPO.com group, and they failed their audit because they didn't have enough cash, or I forget what it was, but for some reason they got disqualified. And so going into that morning, we knew we were like 20% oversubscribed. So we were feeling our oats like, oh, we're going to go to the top of the curve. We're oversubscribed. Now 30% or 40% of the deal like disappeared. And so we went from 20% oversubscribed to like 20% undersubscribed, which meant we didn't have enough people to buy the shares at any of the price range. And I remember this was quite a moment because Chet looked at us and he said, hey guys, I could squeeze you down on price. We could go below the range, but I'm not going to do that. He said, and we could try to go out on the road show for a couple more days. But the problem is when you extend these things, people get suspicious.
Like, what's going on?
And they think this deal stinks. There's something wrong. Why are people pulling out? And so if we don't close today, this may fall apart and may never close. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you guys to price this at the bottom of the range, but I'm not going to squeeze you lower. And I will personally buy the extra 20%.
Wow.
I'm going to cover it. And I just want your agreement. You guys will continue the road show for a couple more weeks to go out and generate interest so that more people will buy it and prop the stock price up in the market, and he'd be able to sell some of the extra. And
so he had faith in you.
He did. And Chet Paulson, I believe he's passed away now. He was the man.
Yeah.
Everybody told us, like, that's not how bankers act. Like, it's a cutthroat business. Everybody would have squeezed us down, but he didn't. And, I'm actually pretty proud looking back. I believe we were by far their highest performing IPO ever, over the next few years. But man, this business has always been exciting. Like, at every moment, right when you think you're done, the morning we're going in for the IPO, we have another, 4 hours of sheer terror looking at the deal falling apart.
So this was right before this goes down, before the IPO actually happens.
Yep.
The morning of.
This was the day you're supposed to, they say, go effective. And what happens is, actually, this might be interesting to people too, that when you go effective, what happens is the money comes in to your bank account, the shares issue out to the people who bought it, and then the shares start trading on, in this case, we're a NASDAQ listed company. And then so from there, every day the shares are trading. And by the way, this is an interesting thing. When the share price changes every day, like we had a good day today. I think we hit a new all-time high, like $790, I think we broke today. That actually doesn't really have any impact on the company. Because those are just investors trading your shares. Now, of course, the investors care, and it's our job to make those shares valuable. But there's some days when the stock goes down and employees kind of panic and they go, "What does this mean for the company?" Well, frankly, nothing. Now, if the shares go down a long time, the shareholders can elect a new board of directors and fire people and do all kinds of stuff. But actually, day to day, it really doesn't matter to the operations of the business, and that's important because you can get really distracted looking at the share price and do stupid things. When overall, it's like, you know what? Let the share price do what it's going to do. We need to run the business to create long-term value. Now, the only time really that the share price matters to the company specifically is if you go out to sell more shares to raise money, for example, or for employees. We pay our employees. Everybody in the company gets stock in the company. So, of course, everybody cares that it's more valuable when they go to sell their shares. But it's not like something that matters a ton day to day. And I only share that, and again, it can be a real distraction when management gets too focused on the stock price.
Yep.
You end up doing stupid things because you're not focused on the real business that you're running.
And employees. Like I actually did not know we had a record high today. I try not to check it every day.
Yeah, unfortunately, I made the mistake. I've got it on my Apple Watch face, which is probably a bad idea.
Do you know when I started at Axon, let me back up. The day I started, it was Taser International. The next, in an orientation, all my paperwork was Taser International. The next day is when we changed to Axon. The stock was trading at $23.45 when I started. So it's been an incredible run. Now, but help paint the picture, though. I mean, when you think about someone going, or a company going public, whether it's NASDAQ or on the New York Stock Exchange, you see them up there ringing the bell. But that's not the way it really happens. It just starts trading one day, correct? Which, as you just described it.
That is correct. Yeah. The whole thing about the bell and all that's mostly just
show.
Like we ultimately, in fact, hold on, I think I've got a picture of us ringing the bell at NASDAQ, which, look, it's a super cool thing when it happens, that you get a chance to go in and ring the bell and they put you on TV and all that. But that typically, some companies will do that to celebrate when they do the IPO, but that's not
up on the screen right now for those who are listening and not watching. It's Rick is standing there. It looks like he has a turtleneck on. I can't tell.
That was our look.
It's a look for sure. His brother is beside him, Tom, and there in the background, there's his father cheering him on and clapping. And who are the two women who are there?
So the one woman I think is from the NASDAQ, and then the other woman at the far right was Kathy Hanrahan. She was our chief financial officer. So yeah, it's my dad, Kathy in this picture, me and Tom out in front of the NASDAQ. I'd say that was a cool feeling when you go out in Times Square.
How far after it goes public are you doing this? Like, is it weeks or months?
Yeah, we've done it probably once every other year. Okay. We go back and we'll do this at the NASDAQ.
The one thing, and one thing we're going to do before we wrap this episode, and we'll continue to do it in future episodes, is we do an AMA. And one thing, and it's just looking at this picture, and again, for those who can't see it, it has the Taser International logo with the Earth and then the lightning bolt going through the Earth. And there's a lot of questions in the AMA, and I'll ask one about the retro logos, and like we should do some retro merch. People like the early days, and this was you, right? I mean, you were the chief marketing officer at the time, coming up with that, because when you're a startup, you don't have a marketing department.
That's right. Actually, funny story too. When we think about these photos of the black turtlenecks, there's a funny story there. When we first started, our corporate colors were like a pastel blue, and we had thought like, hey, we want to sell weapons that are going to save lives. And we found is that actually doesn't resonate. In fact, one of the big problems you had with non-lethal weapons, everybody thought they were a joke and that they were like the politically correct thing that the mayor or some politician wants to force police to buy. Now, remember, at this point, we're in the police market. And we had to make our device more appealing to the frontline cop, where it's like, no, this is a serious piece of equipment. And we probably overshot a little bit because we basically changed our corporate colors from pastel blue to the Oakland Raiders. We went black and silver. We had this signature look where we had black turtlenecks with the Taser branding on it, and we'd wear black suits. And when our IPO, they called us like the Men in Black. We'd show up, hauling around this, the original M26, which in and of itself is a pretty serious looking weapon. In fact, for those who can view online, I'm going to put up on screen, the M26 itself, it had this very aggressive, futuristic gun-like look. There's actually a great story about this. how this happened. So let's go back before the IPO. We're designing the M26. And you all met Steve Tuttle, who would come on.
And we had Steve on 3 episodes.
Yeah, that's right. We did. And so Steve and I, right as we'd finished the electronic design, we had to figure out, what is this product going to look like? This is actually one of the really fun things when you're an entrepreneur. You have a blank canvas. We know how many batteries we need. We know what the electric circuit is. We know what the cartridge is, because we wanted to use the same cartridge from the old air taser, but what should this thing be? And I thought, we should make it look like a Star Trek phaser. This thing should be super futuristic. And, other people had different opinions. And so what we did is we hired a firm that specializes in product design, and they went and they made us, like 4 or 5 different foam models. One looked like a TV remote control. One was a very futuristic, like Star Trek looking thing. And we thought, we're going to have this really scientific test. We're going to go, we took it to the American Society of Law Enforcement Trainers. I don't even think that group exists anymore. Yep. These are all cop trainers. And we had a booth with me and Steve Tuttle, and we would put out these 5 foam models, and every model had a little trigger with a laser sight in it. And what we were going to do is we're going to test the ergonomics. We're going to have people pick it up and just say, okay, pick up each unit, point it at this target, and press the button. And then the laser light would come on, and we would measure how accurate they were, aiming it intuitively versus where the laser dot would be. And we figured we'll then pick the device that is most accurate. But what we learned is actually that didn't matter at all. What mattered was the emotional reaction. So remember, all these different products, they're made of foam. So there's nothing actually to them. It's just a piece of foam with a laser in it. But cops would come up and they'd pick up the thing that looks like a remote control, and they'd be like, whatever. They'd pick up the thing, it looks like a toy, which broke my heart. The Star Trek one, like everybody sort of laughed at.
That was your number one choice.
That was my choice. And I've learned this a lot of times in my career. Don't always go with what Rick likes, because I'm not the customer. And then they would pick up the one that had this blocky gun shape that, again, looked like we're showing here, would become the M26. And just the shape of it had this emotional reaction where they'd go, oh, yeah. They'd hold it out like a gun and they'd say, that's going to work. And it was this really interesting study into human psychology, that the sheer shape of it made them perceive it differently. All of a sudden, that was credible, because that is shaped like the familiar gun thing that I'm used to. And so that's why we ended up going with the form factor of the gun shape, was purely around, well, not purely. It was actually, it also happened to be.
I was going to say it's probably close to being the most accurate.
It was the most accurate as well. But I guess I'm focusing on the thing that was surprising was the psychology. And then as we talked to cops as well, there were very practical reasons too, where they're like, look, it's really hard to learn to do things under stress. I mean, the whole reason a gun is shaped like that is when you point your finger, this is like a 14-degree angle, from your finger to the grip. And so you want to mimic the natural movement of pointing. And then, making the trigger the same and all that, it allows them to use similar skills, so they know how to operate the device.
Just take a few minutes and we'll wrap up this episode and we'll get to some of the questions. But so you, when it goes public, what was the share price? What was it trading at?
In fact, let me pull up a stock chart and we can look at it together here. Now, what's interesting, this is in the old Taser stock price. A few years later, in 2004, we would do a 12-for-1 split. And what that means is if you had 1 share of stock at the beginning of 2004, we did a 3-for-1 split. So then if you had 1 share, you now had 3. And then we did a 2-for-1 split. So now if you had 3, you had 6. Then we did another 2-for-1 split. So by the end of the year, you had 12 shares for every share you started with. By the way, we may be the only company of any major company on stock exchange that did 3 stock splits in a year. And stock splits they're somewhat controversial. Like Warren Buffett thinks they can be a bit of a distraction. That's why 1 share of Berkshire Hathaway is like $700,000. Because basically what you're doing is it's like trading a $10 bill for 10 ones. Like you have more shares, but it doesn't make the whole company worth more. But anyway, this was I'm showing you here the stock price before all those splits. So you would actually, in today's price, divide by 12. So we went public at around $7, but divide by 12, and that puts you at like 50 cents compared to today's stock price. And then what happened is it started to run up over the course of 2001, largely because there was something that happened. Do you remember what happened in 2001?
It's true. 9/11.
Yeah. And by the way, I was in the World Trade Center during the IPO roadshow weeks beforehand.
Wow.
So I did some soul searching. You know, some people never bothered to leave the towers. And I've always wondered, would that have been me? Would I have been the guy who's like, yeah, you know, something happened. The other tower was hit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's not going to happen to me, and go on about your day.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, a lot of people died. Anyways, so after 9/11, something that was interesting happening. There was United Airlines went out and they did a study on all the different weapons that are available. And they concluded that the taser was the best choice to defend a cockpit.
When you're flying at 35,000 feet in a pressurized aluminum tube, yeah.
Well, and look, this was fairly controversial, but
I mean, I'm saying that because in terms of firing an actual bullet inside of that, so yeah.
Well, exactly. I mean, so they went and actually did a bunch of testing, and what they found was like, well, if you're a pilot and you're flying in the left seat, if you're going to be shooting an attacker, number one, you're probably going to have to grab with your left hand and be shooting it
over your shoulder,
with the ejection port popping, you know, spent shells into your head, you know, right next to your ear. Very hard to fire backwards because of the recoil. And then look, like if you miss, it could blow a hole in the aircraft. If you hit the avionics, it could destroy it. You could crash the whole plane. And then the other thing is like terrorists have the advantage of surprise.
Mm-hmm.
If you put guns in an airplane, you know, if a terrorist gets a hold of the gun, they are now really in control.
Yep.
Whereas a taser, they felt was a reasonable alternative. It's like, you know what? It can stop, you know, one person at that time. It was one shot per taser. If it gets commandeered, they can take down one person, but they can't take over the plane. And we actually went with United Airlines. They shot tasers into the flight decks of test aircraft to make sure it didn't damage it. But, you know, airplane avionics are built to survive lightning strikes. So a taser was a pretty easy thing. Anyway, but, you know, United Airlines selected us. And then our stock price really, you know, ran after that.
I see that.
And a lot of folks were buying our stock thinking taser is a homeland security, airline security play. And one thing I'm actually pretty proud of, and this is a great example where we didn't fall in love with that story. We're like, you know, yes, we want to help defend aircraft, but like policing is our core business. There's not that many airplanes in the world.
You didn't go chase the shiny object.
We didn't chase the shiny object. And the stock ran up. But then in June of 2002, Congress passed the Federal Flight Deck Officers Act. And as you'll see, if you see this chart price, our stock tanked. Because all the people that bought on the momentum that this was a 9/11 stock, it was an airline security stock, were like, oh, I guess not. So I learned a couple things there. One of which is if you are dealing with Congress, you have to have lobbyists. Because we had assumed, like United Airlines had done thousands of pages of testing. And we're like, this is so obvious.
But you thought you would just walk in and convince them yourself.
Yeah, well, and we're like, United, they're bigger than we are. Like, they know what they're doing in Congress. Like, here's all the data. What we later learned was that some of the gun rights groups like the NRA were going around D.C. actively promoting that they should put guns in the cockpit, not a taser. And look, they had their arguments. We had ours. But we weren't there to make our arguments because we weren't in the room. I didn't realize, you know, how important it is you in a democracy, like you have to engage. There's like 400, 500 elected officials in Congress. Boy, I should actually know that number. Anyway.
You've been on Capitol Hill a lot lately for sure.
But if you're not there to tell your story, they're only going to hear the other guy. And so Congress actually passed a bill to allow pilots to carry firearms and not tasers. And so that, you know, the stock fell. We never really recovered from that in terms of aviation security. But as we'll talk about in the next episode, that focus on policing led to our next big leg of growth.
Yep. All right. Why don't we, well, I'm looking back at Mark and producer Dylan. Why don't you look? I think there are 435 members in the House of Representatives and then obviously 100 senators, right?
Yep. I think
maybe
that's right.
Maybe you guys can look it up and do a little fact check for us to make sure that's correct. Just shout it out when you get it. All right. So new segment here on the Bold to Go podcast. I think if this goes well, we'll continue it. We put out on our socials, put out on my socials and the Boldly Go podcast socials, Slido, which is a program we use, and you can ask a question of me, of Rick, of all of us. So this might not be just about stuff we discussed for this episode. Let's go through a few of them.
Yeah, and I don't know what's coming, so this will be fun.
Don't know what's coming. This will be fun. It's always fun doing AMA with Rick. Now, we'll say, like, we will continue to push this out if it goes well. You can certainly, if you follow me on X, which is at Mike Wagers, or LinkedIn, and then Dylan, maybe you and Kool-Aid can put in the Boldly Go podcast socials for, put it in the show notes for all our socials. I don't even know what it is. Okay, question number one. Looking back, what is the one main thing you would tell a startup founder based on your experiences?
The number one thing I would tell you is focus on hiring. It is the single most important thing you do. But when you're an early founder, it feels administrative. You're like, we've got all these problems we've got to solve. I've got to figure out how to sell this thing, go build the product. I personally am more interested in the product design sorts of questions. But think of it this way. Let's say you need a head of sales. Like if you as a founder are out doing the sales work, you hire one person who's actually better than you at that job. You never have to go do that job again, and just replicate that across every person that you hire. And I would say early on, I didn't pay enough attention. It was like, hey, we just put an ad back in the newspaper back in the day. We'd interview a couple people. We'd hire somebody. We hired some really great, wonderful people. But I would say it was a mixed bag. We didn't have, and we ended up not getting the type of people you really wanted, the people that are going to challenge your thinking. I think Steve Jobs basically said at some point, I'm hiring you because I want you to be smarter than me at the thing I'm hiring you for. I butchered that quote, but
close enough.
And there were a lot of times where we were hiring that, you know what, we're too busy. Let's just hire this person. And that is it wasn't really until 2008, 2009 that we began to pivot the way we approached hiring, from hiring kind of like a family, like, hey, we're going to hire people we like, to no, we're running a pro sports team. There was a real shift in thinking when we get to that point. I'll tell an in-depth story. But that transformed the business.
So hiring is
hiring is number one.
I actually didn't think that was going to be number one, but that's why I'm not a founder and CEO. All right, next question. And I think is again, you start selling into law enforcement in 98, M26, we saw that's when it starts taking off. Are there any specific customers, and this is dangerous because you might leave somebody out, but are any specific customers that have been here since the inception of Taser?
So I believe one of the first that went full deployment, Tasers for every officer, was the Salt River.
You are correct.
Here in Scottsdale, Arizona.
I know that because of Steve Tuttle.
Yeah. Well, they're right next to Scottsdale. It's an independent tribal nation, Salt River. They were number one. I would say probably the most important one going into our IPO was Sacramento PD. They were one of the first big agencies. And being the capital of California, they had just gone full deployment. Which actually, there's a story I got to go into for a second here. So we're getting ready, we go through all the due diligence. We're doing the roadshow. We're getting ready to go public and raise the money. And all through our IPO documents, we were talking about Sacramento PD, right? That was our crown jewel, capital of California. So the lawyers call us up and they say, hey, we can't get Sacramento PD to call us back. Like, they're all over your document. We need to confirm that they have fully deployed the Taser to every officer. And so we called them. I can't remember if it was me or Steve Tuttle. And here we go again, man. Deals at risk. What had happened in Sacramento, a police officer had been involved in an arrest incident. And as they were arresting this guy, he was resisting. And the officer went to draw his Taser, and he drew his gun instead. And he meant to do a drive stun to the hip. And he shot this person in the hip, causing major damage. And so Sacramento had pulled all their Tasers off the street. Yeah. And so we're like, oh my God. Like, again, that's the sort of thing that can tank the whole IPO.
A lot of ups and downs.
And so we basically had to go scrambling out to California, meeting with Sacramento PD. And we basically offered to replace all of their Tasers with yellow from the black one. So it'd be super visually obvious. And by the way, that's why today, Taser 10, when we sell it for patrol use, it only comes in yellow to avoid and really reduce that risk. But one more example there, and luckily we had to get them back. We had to ship the replacement units all in the middle of trying to do this IPO so that we could get them to confirm indeed they were fully deployed and happy with the product.
I think this is more of a comment. I've actually already said it. Can we make retro air taser and auto taser merch? So maybe something for you to consider, Rick.
We certainly can. I've got a bunch in my closet still. I was actually looking at maybe throwing some of it away. I guess I should keep it. It's
and then I think maybe just time for one more question. And again, if you keep the questions coming, each episode we'll continue to ask questions. I have a whole bank now, but I think we have time for one more today. This is actually funny. Love the pod, first time caller, long time listener. Love to hear about the craziest taser idea and possible product that you've had or the company has had.
The craziest taser idea would likely have been Shockwave. In fact, I might have a picture of Shockwave that I can even show here. And this was not planned.
No.
But Shockwave was an area coverage weapon. Think of this like a claymore mine.
That's what it looks like.
And and by the way, you could stack these together like Lego bricks. So the standard Shockwave had 6 cartridges on it. And so that would cover like an arc of distance. So the idea was for the military to use these. If somebody's coming up on a military checkpoint, you wouldn't have to carry a taser. You just hit a button, it would saturate the area. And you could put multiple of these together. So like now I'm showing an image, you could put like 6 or 8 of these together and cover a full 180 degrees. You could create interlocking fields of fire. We thought this was the greatest idea ever. Unfortunately, when we went to the U.S. Department of Defense, what I learned is you don't build things hoping the DoD is going to want them. They have to have a requirement for it. And you have to have advocates within the bureaucracy. When you show up like, hey, look at this awesome landmine alternative that we built, they don't even know what to do with it because you haven't built the advocacy. So that product ended up failing. And we did have some human volunteers get hit with like 6 taser cartridges at the same time, part of our safety testing.
That is quite unbelievable. So why don't we end episode 7 here on the Shockwave. As a reminder, we release episodes every Friday on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. If you like what you hear, we hope you do subscribe and certainly follow us on all our socials. But you can follow Rick on X at Axon Rick, and you can follow me on X on at Mike Wagers. We certainly push out information about the podcast there. And then Rick, I think we got another one in the bag. And
all right, we'll see you all next week.
All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Started in a room, no heat, no fame. Pastel blues, but we changed the game. Black turtlenecks, suits like chrome. Taser spark, made the silence moan. We scanned the past, linked every page. Burned through docs like a data cage. IPO chase, yeah, high-speed flight from desert dust to Monaco nights.
Upload the docs, cross-link the threads. Taste the truth, rewrote what's dead. Men in black, we're glitching time. One shot pose, redesign.
Roadshow heat, jet stream haze. Taste the suit, set minds ablaze. No refunds, but Southwest cared. Super 8 points and flights we shared. Shockwave dreams, stack in rows. Modular fear in a neon glow. Didn't chase planes, we chased the cause. Policing first, electric laws.
We rose